Welcome to the Idaho Falls Online Lunch. My name is Donald Carey, and it's my pleasure to introduce our guest today, Chief Justice Roger Burdick of the Idaho Supreme Court. By way of short introduction, Roger Burdick earned his Bachelor of Science degree in 1970 from the University of Colorado, and then transferred to Moscow, Idaho, and earned his Juris Doctorate degree in 1974. After he graduated law school, he worked in private practice in Twin Falls and Jerome County, Idaho. While at the law firm of Hart, Burdick, and Helser in Jerome, he served as a public defender in Camas, Lincoln, Jerome, and Gooding counties, and engaged in the general practice of law. In 1980, in November of 80, he was elected the prosecuting attorney for Jerome County. He served in that position slightly less than a year, when in 1981 he was appointed the magistrate judge in Jerome County. He served until September of 1993, when he was appointed district court judge in Twin Falls County. And in August of 2003, Governor Dirk Kempthorne appointed him to the 53rd Justice of the Idaho Supreme Court, a position that he serves on today. He's been the Chief Justice of the Idaho Supreme Court since August 1st of 2011, and his current term ends as Chief Justice in January of 2021. Justice Burdick gives tirelessly of his time. He serves on a number of committees in our state, in our region, and nationally, and he's a tireless advocate for the courts. So it's our pleasure to have him speak to us today about the status of the courts in the C-19 pandemic. And with that, I'll turn it over to Justice Roger Burdick. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Don. This is unique because I cannot see the audience. I usually know 1 or 2 or 10 people in the audience, and as a result, can play off of them. I got a law degree in 1970, so I'm sure some of our audience members weren't born then. But be that as it may, we're in the COVID-19. I think that the COVID-19 really has nothing to do with the virus. It really has something to do with the freshman 15. If you'll remember, you go back to college, you automatically gain 15 pounds your freshman year. I know I'm sitting in my house in the basement and have been for about 6 weeks, working continuously in that regard. And now I've put on the COVID-19. So I hope everyone is healthy and not gaining as much weight as I am. Hopefully what I'm going to do today is give you a brief history of the court's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, some of the resources that we have installed, what's the future of the court system as a result of COVID-19, and it truly is remarkable. I can only think of the court system in Idaho being changed as much as it has been as a result of this pandemic only during World War II. The restrictions that were placed on the court system certainly were reminiscent of the Second World War in terms of types of cases and ability to carry on as we had in the past. And in addition, World War II, as you all know, changed the world forever, socially, philosophically, and I am positive that COVID-19 has done the same with the courts as we go forward. So the first order of business are the pandemic resources that the court has been able to make available to those of you who are wondering what the courts are as a result of the pandemic resources. I'll go to how do you access the emergency orders that we have had to put out as a result. We have put out a series of emergency orders under the constitutional provision which indicates that the Idaho State Supreme Court is, in fact, in charge of the general administration of the courts. And as such, during this emergency, we have put out numerous orders starting in mid-March of this year. And in those orders, the first one I will go through just to kind of indicate to you the differences that we had to take care of and the things that we did. The first thing is we said, with the exception of emergency matters, define those as child protective hearings, domestic violence hearings, and evidentiary hearings in criminal cases, and all in-person appearances for civil and criminal dockets shall be excused. So as of March 14th of, or March 13th of 2020, all in-court proceedings were stopped except for those individuals who we deemed the vulnerable or those who had significant issues constitutionally, i.e. the loss of liberty. How did the court arrive at those decisions? And from the beginning, the court listened to the experts in the state and nation and took this matter very seriously, as well as the significant spread of the disease. And the thing that we had to balance, were myriad. Throughout, we had to balance the necessity for certain court cases, as I've indicated, our vulnerable citizenry, guardianships, conservatorships, domestic violence, protective orders, criminal cases. Those types of cases were, in fact, the only cases that we allowed to go forward on a regular basis. But we had to also balance constitutional rights of victims, criminal defendants, the public safety involved in that regard, both as a result of our court proceedings, but also those who had to attend the courts. A lot of people don't understand that there is a limited constitutional right for the public in general, to be present at trials, criminal trials. And so we had to balance this issue of public access to trials. Quite frankly, we're still working on that because we have suspended all jury trials in criminal cases till August actually, and then all civil trials until October. Why, you might ask? How can you do that? It's because of the safety of our jurors. Think of what happens when you go to a jury. For those of you who have been lucky enough to be on a jury, you sit in a large room very close together while the jury panel is picked. At that point in time, you then go, if you're lucky enough to become a juror, you go into a very small jury room and you spend the next 2-3 days, or sometimes weeks, together. And you are in that jury box, which is very close together, or that jury room, which is confined and very, very isolated. We can't do that in the day and age of COVID-19, not until we've had a significant period of time to find resources, to find space, and to be able to then accommodate juries, not only juries, but grand juries. For instance, there is a newspaper article in the Nampa newspaper today about Ada County having rented a portion of the Ada County Fairgrounds to put up kiosks so that those individuals who do not have access to cell phones or to computers would be able to go to one of 10 kiosks and there participate in their proceeding virtually. Again, and that's what we're going to have to figure out. How are we going to have juries? Maybe we have juries in our high school gymnasiums in small communities. Maybe we have the um, uh, we televise on YouTube the juries and keep the public out of the courtroom, but then use the area that the citizenry usually sit in as the jury box. That has already taken place in one case here in the state of Idaho, where the judge had the jury sit at a safe distance in the public area and closed the courtroom to any other party other than those participating. So again, we've had to balance all of those things. We worried constantly about our downstream users. Think of your courthouses. Most of them are dual purpose. So at that point in time, what do we do with the recorder's office? What do we do with people trying to come in and get marriage licenses? In some areas, the courthouses were completely shut, and people went to tents and took care of their business in that regard. Other arrangements had to be made. Think about all of our court clerks in the courthouses. Usually, our courthouses are not mansions, they are overcrowded. Usually, they are very close together. We had to think, if we continue court on a regular basis, like we have been, what, are we endangering those fine individuals, those hardworking men and women upon which the court system and county government depends so much upon? How about the janitorial staff? Every time I go into my office at the Supreme Courthouse, we've got a janitorial staff that has to then clean that office to make sure that I'm not a asymptomatic carrier, and so that my judicial assistant or my law clerk, if they go in, they're not getting the virus from hard surfaces. So those were the things that we took into consideration as a court, all before March 13th of 2020, all on Zoom, because most of us left the courthouse. I happen to be have lung issues, and I'm an asthmatic, and as a result, I've basically been here for 7 weeks since the 1st of March, I guess. So, and so the court has been working by Zoom, having its meetings by Zoom, and the court had to then balance all of these things. And then what do we do with so then we had to give direction to our administrative district judges. Each of you have an administrative district judge. I don't mean to demean that position, but they're kind of like our regional directors if you work for a company. There are regional directors, and they have some autonomy in that regard. We entered these orders indicating who could be in attendance in a courtroom, um, indicating that judges had to issue summonses instead of bench warrants for non-appearance, use pretrial evidence-based release issues rather than strictly bond cases. We all show cause dockets for payment of fines and court costs were continued for 60 days. Didn't want people coming into a courthouse to pay a fine. Same with traffic infractions. Trials were called off in that regard. There are procedural safeguards that had to be vacated because it just was impossible to put people in a courtroom. If you are a criminal defendant, you're entitled to have a preliminary hearing within 21 days if you are out on bond, and we suspended that rule. We ordered posting of warnings as to when you could come into the courthouses. They were basically the same ones as the governor initiated. We then made arrangements with all of our clerks. And by the way, I want to thank the county clerks and the court personnel who have been very, very positive, very, very helpful in uh, understanding why we are trying to do this, understanding that they will have additional duties, and they've been very helpful to the citizenry as well as to our judges and local officials. We encourage counties to have sanitation areas in that regard. So, if you're interested, there have basically been 3 of these orders put out. And if you will go to page 3 of the slides, you will see that we have had those orders superseded, and you can find the progression of the court reopening as we have flattened the curve, as we have scrambled to make different arrangements, i.e., telecommuting, i.e., phone conferences in place of in person, in court appearances. I guess we were in the business of reopening prior to anybody else because it's obvious that courts must continue. They must do their business as best they can. And we have tried to do that as we have flattened the curve and then brought in resources, brought in training, et cetera, so that people don't have to appear in person as much as we used to. So if you want to see those orders, they are on our website. And you can then also see the local orders of every judicial district. The 7th district is Idaho Falls. Your administrative district judge put out certain orders in response to ours. We tried to give those individuals some ability to work with the many different courthouse structures, the many excuse me, the many arrangements within the courthouses, tried to work with the judges locally through the administrative district judges and give them some leeway. We meet every Tuesday with all of our court personnel from the administrative office, as well as our administrative district judges, our trial court administrators, as well as those justices who can attend. The Court of Appeals judges are also on that Zoom meeting to sit down and discuss, okay, what did we do right here? What do we need to change? What's the timetable for improvements, et cetera? As a result of that, I think communication has been built, and certainly respect for the job that our trial court administrators and administrative district judges have done throughout the state, as well as our in-court clerks and the county clerks. Unbelievable creativity, positivity, hard work. You can all be proud of those individuals. So Zoom is going to be with us for a long period of time in the court system. Zoom is the mechanism by which court proceedings will be handled. It has been working fairly well. We have had trials, we have had hearings, we have had any number of things throughout the state held by Zoom. The increases in security that have been put together by the Zoom managers, I think, have helped immensely. We have a very good IT department in the courts, and they've worked diligently to make sure that we have very few, if any, disruptions. Of course, when you think of it, if any of you have been in the courts on a regular basis, there can be a disruption any day in a courtroom. Our judges train in that regard. Our security staff train in that regard. So a disruption is not something that a court or a judge can't handle. But Zoom has improved significantly, and the support for the court access through Zoom is my next um, slide, and it indicates that we are going to have electronic hearings um, holding on Zoom, and our administrative office of the courts is currently developing live trainings for attorneys on how to successfully utilize this platform in a court proceeding. Most of the problems we have had in moving to the Zoom platform have been with attorneys who may not have the training, may not have the accessibility to the training. And so we are working diligently, hope to have it next week, maybe the week after, a, a training video on Zoom. I know our court staff and the Supreme Court Administrative Office has a Zoom um, work uh, a work session every day at noon, where all of the court staff, clerks, et cetera, can get in and learn how to use this tool that we're going to have to use for a significant period of time. There are also you can, if you will take this down for those attorneys or litigants that are here, there are some tools already available, and it gives you a link in that regard at isc.idaho.gov/isc-zoom. And again, we are trying to, as much as possible, help our citizenry, help our lawyers, and help our court staff work with this new normal. We also have, if the next slide will show you, in addition to providing quick tips for a successful Zoom meeting and answering frequently asked questions, the website provides both written and video training options that already exist. And there's a list of those getting started with Zoom that I think you will find enjoyable. If not enjoyable, informative. What are we going to do going forward with some of the more interesting activities of the court? One of them is the admission of new lawyers in Idaho. We have historically had an admission ceremony for our new lawyers where the state court and the federal court of Idaho join together. And at that point in time, we have a wonderful ceremony in Boise where family, friends, spouses, partners can come enjoy this crowning event for the new lawyer who has gone through 3 years of strenuous academic training and then passed the Idaho State Bar. And then there's a brief reception afterwards. Always a very fulfilling, very positive experience for all of us. The old judges, the new judges, the bar commissioners, all of us find it one of the great things that we do every year. COVID has basically put that all on hold. We are going to have an admission ceremony. It's tomorrow. But again, because of social distancing, because of the problems with COVID-19, we usually have this at the Grove on the Court, a very large facility. They canceled us out 2 or 3 months ago when this first started. So now we're having it in the Supreme Court building. It is much, much smaller. The procedure will be that starting at 9 a.m., we will take in up to 10 individuals into the court. They will have face masks. They will then be brought into the courtroom 10 at a time. And I, because of social distancing, will not be accompanied by the other justices. And they truly love to be there, but it's just an impossibility. Um, I will swear those 10 in, make a few remarks, and they will leave, and we'll bring in another 10 until we're done at the end of the day. Again, a wonderful, wonderful, uplifting ceremony that has been short circuited by COVID-19. But on the other hand, we are trying to make do as best we can to keep everyone safe. One of the great things about, I think, the admissions ceremony is since the 1880s, Idaho has had each new lawyer sign the lawyer book. And you can go back and see the Hollies. You can see the people who've made this state uh, in that book, signed when they passed the bar, when they were sworn in. It really does impress upon the new students that they are the newest, or the new lawyers, that they are the newest link in a chain that goes back to the 1880s, a chain that has brought respect to the Idaho state of Idaho in its governance, in its communities, in so many ways that lawyers serve each and every one of us. And quite frankly, another thing the Idaho State Supreme Court does that I'm not sure anyone else in the nation does is when you pass on in this life to your greater reward, every March we have a ceremony for those lawyers and judges who have passed on. They are each recognized. Families come. It is a great honor to bestow upon those individuals who worked in such a noble profession in their adult lives. For those of you who do have new, and I'm looking at the last slide on this pandemic resource. For those of you who would want to see your grandson or your son or your in-laws son be sworn in, this will be accessed through our Idaho Supreme Court website. If you get on there, it will be live, and you will be able to see your loved one be sworn into the Idaho State Bar. The bar exams, sometimes the lawyers in this crowd will be asking me, are we going to have a bar exam next year? Usually takes place in July. The Idaho State Bar, through their commissioners and executive director, have determined that they do have a facility that will allow social distancing as well as masks to allow the bar to be taken. The issue is in Idaho, we are a portion of the uniform bar examination, and that is put on by a independent group, and they have decided that they will continue to give the bar if they have enough participants. At this point in time, I think that there is a very large chance that there will be a bar exam in July, and the Idaho State Bar, through their commissioners, including Don Carey, who's president right now, are working on a safe mechanism for that bar exam. So, what are going to be the ongoing issues that will be affecting your court system as a result of COVID-19? I think you can be guaranteed that Zoom or teleconferencing will take on an added dimension in your courts. I know as a result of this pandemic, we've had to review rules. Why do we have that rule? Well, we had that rule when, um, Lord, when Burdick even came into the bar in 1970. Why do we still have it? I don't know. Why do we still have Burdick? I don't know. Anyway, um, uh, I think there'll be changes. There'll be changes in rules, procedures, and electronics are with us to stay. And I'd like to give to you Governor Brad Little's letter to his executive branch as to what pandemic is going to do to the court's fundings. Uh, the Idaho State Supreme Court is uh, a $73 million business when you take into consideration all dedicated funds for treatment courts, for IT, for family court fund, guardianship and conservatorships, general fund allocation, as well as some federal grant money that we always apply for. And as a result, there's going to be a significant decrease coming up. As you can see from Governor Little's um, slide, he's already taking a proactive position in this regard. And you can see some of the things that he's told the executive branch that to be prepared for. Because of the separation of powers, the Idaho State Supreme Court will make certain decisions concerning these funding sources, these funding outlays. They are not governed by the governor's order. But having said that, we try very, very hard to mirror always. If those of you in the audience who remember the 2007, 2008 cutbacks of almost 10% in state government, our judges, in order to balance our budget, worked for free for 2 days. Uh, each and every judge in Idaho volunteered. They went to work on that day. They just didn't get paid for it because they had to balance the fact the courts must stay open. But in addition, the courts must act as good stewards for funds for the governance of the state of Idaho. And probably we'll ask in the future for that at some point, because there are going to be significant issues financial in terms of the courts. Um, as you can see, we are looking at hiring freezes, um, paid administrative leave going away. We will be looking at employee compensation, furloughs, other. There's been a hold on purchasing other than the electronics and things that we needed to transition to this new court model that we've all been involved with. All of these things will be on the table. The governor has asked for 1% out of this year's budget. And in July, I think, is the next budget, a 5% decrease. There were the legislature, I think, okayed certain pay raises to state employees. I think those may be clawed back and not given in order to meet these percentages that the governor's talking about. The Idaho State Courts will be a partner with the legislature and the governor in making sure that we go forward on a solid financial basis. There can be no doubt about that. But as a result, we find ourselves as a court system, as I indicated, we have called off since March probably thousands of cases. They are still sitting here waiting to be worked on at the same time that we're going to have to be cutting budgets and that type of thing. So it's going to be an interesting decision, an interesting set of circumstances as to how do we, again, just like we did starting in March, balance the needs of our citizens with, in fact, the needs of a court system that must always continue to work and help solve our citizens' problems. One area that I want to talk to the lawyers in the audience. I think the Idaho State Bar is streaming this in addition. One of the areas that we will be addressing is our e-filing fees. For those of you who are have not gone from the beginning through Odyssey and the implementation of our case management system, in order to get e-filing up and running, the Idaho State Supreme Court made the decision that we would pay up to $1 million a year for the envelopes that you send your e-filings in, and we would pay that money to Tyler for that service, Tyler Technologies. We have been doing that since the beginning of Odyssey, and our contract is coming up in the next year or 18 months. I can say with some degree of certainty that we will have to be asking for contribution from our lawyers for e-filing envelopes. That means your costs are going to go up. That means that you're not going to like it. That means that we will try to do the best we can to keep it under control. We understand that. It's an access to justice issue. And again, we will continue to try to balance your needs, the citizens' needs. But again, we have been funding this for a significant period of time, and it is time to now transition to getting some help in the future. I don't know how I'm doing for time. Dawn, have I gone over? Am I under?
We're about there, Judge.
Okay. I just want to thank the people in the audience for your interest. I would like to again thank the county commissioners throughout the state for working with us. It's been a hard thing, and there have been millions of decision points made at the local level. And for the most part, I can't say enough about how great everyone has worked together to get us through this. But like everything else, we did our best. We will continue to improve. And in addition, we are changed forever in the Idaho court system. Don, do you have any questions or?
I think we're about out of time, Your Honor. So I'm going to let people get back to work, and I know the court has calendar this afternoon. I think you have some deliberations to get to. So I will say, as a practitioner and as a member of the Idaho Bar Board of Commissioners, I do appreciate the proactive way that the court has addressed this issue. It really has been a monumental task, and your guidance and the court's guidance has been laudable. I have a few people to thank here. First off, thank you, Justice Burdick, for your time today. I know you're busy. I need to thank the Idaho Falls Rotary Club, my Rotary Club, the Idaho Falls Chamber, the Idaho Falls City Club, and the Idaho Falls Civitans, and certainly, last but not least, the folks here at IE Productions, which are doing a stellar job facilitating these service club lunch meetings. And with that, Your Honor, unless you have a final remark, I think, as the court would say, we're adjourned. So.
Well, one thing I would like to add, I'd like to congratulate Cole Hammond, number one, for this service. What a remarkable thing you've done, Cole. Thank you very much. You were so easy to work with. I'm just amazed at what we can do with talented people, and and electricity. So thanks to all in the audience, and have a great day. Stay out of court.